Here you are at another episode of Varsity House Podcast with your host, Sean Crawford. On this episode, I bring in my dear friend Carl Jones to co host this. And then as a guest, we have Jac Collinsworth. Jack, appreciate you coming on.
Appreciate you guys having me, man. It's been a minute. I've been listening to you guys, so it's nice to be with you.
For sure. And so obviously you do a lot of things nowadays. And, to list off a few of them are sportscaster for NBC Sports, play-by-play with the USFL and also Notre Dame. And then along with, a lot of other things as well. Where are you, at today? I know obviously Sunday Night Football just passed and you had to work that, but just give us a rundown of where you're at right now and where you're settled right now.
Yeah, so I'm out on the West Coast, so we just flexed into the Chargers game this weekend. So it was nice. It's one of those weeks where didn't have to take a trip, didn't go to the airport, which was it's a rare, unique week for us. But I was out here this week and did the game yesterday, bounced around today, went to some meetings and stuff, and then I'm back out here. But for the most part, I was living in Cincinnati through the Notre Dame schedule and would drive up to South Bend, which is about a 4-hour drive. And then as soon as that season wrapped up, we've had a nice little run of West Coast games. So I came out here and, anytime you don't have to fly back and forth across the country, it's a pretty good deal.
Mm-hmm. That has to be, obviously a toll on you. And then, being that this year you got a new role also with NBC and, specifically with Notre Dame football, kind of you and Jason Garrett and, obviously it's a great opportunity, but just, touch on, being able to have that opportunity, being a Notre Dame student as well, calling the spring games. And now, you're doing the play-by-play and, get to be the face of Notre Dame football on each and every Saturday.
Yeah, it's an amazing deal, man. It really is. I mean, you're sitting there at the 50-yard line at Notre Dame Stadium, and I can remember my brother was playing up at Notre Dame. That's his jersey over there. Of course, we got Shaq over on the opposite side. But I can just remember when he was playing how cool I thought it was just to have a ticket to be in that stadium, and to watch him run out of the tunnel. I was like, man, this is Notre Dame football. Here come the Irish, man. They're running onto the field. So I can remember that growing up, and now to be in that booth at the 50-yard line, Marcus Freeman in his first year, it's really a special experience, man. It's one of those where feels like everything you did throughout your whole life, going all the way back to high school and middle school when I first started doing all this stuff, has led up to this. You know what I mean? It's led up to this moment. It's a huge responsibility. I understand that. And also it's just a joy, man. It's so much fun to be able to meet with Coach Freeman and meet with all those Notre Dame players. You know what Notre Dame football players are like. They got so many interests and interesting things going on in their life inside the football program and outside the football program. But, Coach Reese, Tommy Reese, I remember when he was, playing quarterback up there, and now to be meeting with him as the offensive coordinator, and he's passing all this knowledge back down to the next generation. Every week, you can't wait to get in your car and go up there, get a chance to meet with them, and then the game the following day. It's really a special experience, man.
Mm. You mentioned, high school and middle school when you first started this. Now, a lot of people may not know you played football, growing up. To kind of just talk about your football career, but then also, did this broadcasting dream, come early, or was it, at fault because of other things maybe didn't happen in football or any other sports?
Yeah, so I grew up playing football, playing basketball, playing baseball in high school, and then probably right around my junior senior year, I had a back injury that knocked me out of football for a period of the season, a long period of the season, and so we would start doing not only the daily announcements where you would give the students every bit of information, but it was a chance to give them a break from the day. That was kind of the way that we started looking at it. Was we got 5 minutes here where we can give everybody a break from math class and science class, and we can just do this our way. And one of my best friends was producing the show. So I started really taking that very seriously in high school. And then when I was unable to play football, we would start doing, the halftime show for the game. They had this big jumbotron at our football stadium so you could project right out there to the field. It was unbelievable technology that they had. They redid the high school, and the first thing that they finished was the broadcast studio. So you can imagine this high school that's completely under construction, but the one thing that's finished is this state-of-the-art broadcast facility. And that's the way that they wanted to design it. So as soon as I walked through the high school, I said, I want to be a part of that. And, when I'm 14, 15 years old, I was already taking it very serious.
No, obviously, it's funny sitting down and speaking with you now. I told Croft this a couple months back. I knew your dad as the broadcaster, not the good football player. And
Right,
I told my dad about it, and he slapped me upside the head. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. But growing up in that household, you really didn't get that feel or ick to want to get in that realm until you said high school?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was probably the first opportunity. It was the first time where I've been around, and it wasn't like I went straight into broadcasting. I wanted to be a cameraman. I mean, to be completely honest with you. So the class was called Introduction to Filmmaking. And so the first thing we did was we got these cameras that they had just purchased, and we'd be going around the school. We shot, little mini movies, and we would shoot all kinds of stuff. And then we'd go back into the classroom, and you'd spend the week editing the videos that you shot. So I sort of fell in love with the production aspect of the business long before I ever stepped in front of a camera. I never even had an aspiration at that point to step in front of a camera, to be honest. And I did that for probably a year or so. And then they had a rotation where they had everybody in the class that would host the announcements. You had to go try it. I'm like, man, I want nothing to do with that. Like, I'm good here operating the camera. I like what I got going on. And so then we went out there and did it. I was nervous as heck, horrible at it. And, but, you sort of got to get your first reps and first experience there with relatively nobody watching, where I feel like most people, it takes until well down the line. The cool thing about today's world is you got these podcasts and you got, stuff like this where you can start at a young age. And my guess is you have a lot of people out there who are getting those reps in this way now, but their life was a little bit different a few years ago.
Mm-hmm. And you definitely talk about the reps, and I think that's huge to where I was just, growing up, for me, it was always the extra reps I got were playing sports. So it was, doing extra football drills or running extra laps in track and getting extra shots in basketball or something like that, to where now it's like I get to 25 and I can do a complete career change. And now it's like I'm trying to find just different ways to get reps in, watch different podcasts or watch different interviews and things like that. And I would say that, obviously you started pretty early in high school, but growing up, was there any, because obviously you know who your dad is, was there any reps that you just like maybe unknowingly got to where he said, hey, get up here and, give a class speech or anything like that kind of just, that made you feel comfortable when you first got out there on camera?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably more than anything I thought the live aspect is what prepared me. It's like in TV, you can tape a show and you can do 5 different takes at it and try to get it perfect or what have you. But like to me, the real stuff is where you got one go, you got one shot. You're talking and people are hearing it live, and it gave me a chance to practice that. So every day, in my world, all I cared about was my classmates, my teachers, my football coach, and that's who was watching the show. So it might as well have been 20 million people or 100 million people at the Super Bowl. That's the only people I knew, right? So to me, it was like a big deal every day. So if I'm writing something, to just put a little joke in there, I always try to put a little spin on it so that everybody wouldn't fall asleep when we're reading them through the announcements. But it gave you a chance to. I mean, I remember the first day, man. I was like, I'm going to throw up. I'm nervous as heck. I got to walk out here. And I did, right? And then you come back in and you're like, you kind of get this rep and you watch it back and you're like, man, I'm stiff as heck. I'm looking the wrong direction. I'm doing this. I'm doing that, And so you just made every mistake in the book. But you learned how to interview people. You learned how to ask questions. I kind of learned if I asked this question, okay, it didn't give them as much room to talk. If I asked a shorter question, maybe that gave them more opportunity to tell their story, right? Sometimes it's not all about, when you're asking a question, telling them what you know, which is sometimes I think the mistake people make. It's really about setting them up in the best possible way to tell you their story or the information you want. And a lot of times it's about having that short question and just getting the heck out of their way. And I feel like I learned little tricks of the trade like that through high school. And I would always pick my dad's brain. I'd sit in the back of the film room when he'd be down there working. He's just a film junkie and studies and works hard at this stuff. And I'd sit in the back of his office and fire questions at him when he finished a tape, or just Dad, what's the safety doing on this play? And so that was sort of my introduction to it. And I was hooked. I was very quickly hooked. And now to be able to be doing it is really a cool deal.
Now, peel back the curtain for me a little bit. I'm also in the broadcasting space. I'm a local reporter here in upstate New York. And I guess for the people at home, what is something that you didn't realize came with the job? Maybe how nervous you get, or some things that just the outside world can't see until you get the live reps. Like for someone like myself, I didn't realize, and I guess it doesn't make much sense now, how like a lot of what I do is prompter related. Like I'm reading off of a prompter, and like a lot of people think that reading off of a prompter is easy, but you don't want to sound like you're reading. You want to have like entertain. Like it's funny, like oh, there's words on the screen, just read. But no, you have to like really entertain while you're reading off the prompter. That's just something that I've noticed in your spaces. What is something that you've learned since
it's a really great question. So when we would do the announcements right away, they would send up a copy, and it would, you would read the copy, right? It was like you would read it verbatim, but somebody else had written it. So you'd sound like a robot trying to read somebody else's words, and it would never feel authentic, and it would never feel like it was you. And so then I would just go through and I would put everything in my own words. Now, if somebody else sat down there and tried to read it, it would make absolutely no sense to them. They would sound ridiculous them trying to read it. But you would write it how you speak. And that was one of the first things I learned with the prompter is like, if you're ever going to use it. Now, when we do Football Night in America and stuff, I like to not use it at this point because I feel like it's more natural. And I want to be listening to Rodney. If he says something, I want to react. If something happens in the crowd, I want to react. If something happens in the studio when they're throwing it out to us, I would rather be live in that moment and living in that moment and watching for stuff to react to than worried about reading that the right way. You know what I mean? So it's a balance. Now, there's always going to be stuff where they want you to read this perfect throw to this piece, or you need to read this for a promo. So there's always going to be a balance of the two. But if you're not doing it in your voice, in my opinion, it's going to be really hard. So the more practice you can get at stuff that is unscripted, and even if you have a list of questions, somebody says something that's more interesting, following up on that and then following up on the next thing they say, to me, that's the fun stuff in this business. You know what I mean? But it comes with doing it over and over and over again. And then you start being more interested in going, forget the script. I want to live in this moment right here because it's more engaging.
I do have to ask you this. Have you ever played Madden muted? And I only ask just because oftentimes because when I know your dad and it's from Madden, when to me it's just like normal, commentator is talking, but to you, I'm sure you're probably playing with your buddies and things like that. And it's like, oh, dang, I got to hear my dad right now.
Yeah.
Did you often, switch the music or just mute it sometimes when you were playing?
Yeah. Sometimes I'd play some music. Yeah. I mean, sometimes my dad would be sitting in the room. I loved playing Madden. So it's like, he's already talking to me. There's no way I can't have him talking in the game and talking in real life. I'm getting confused who to listen to here. But he did it a long time ago. He doesn't sound like he still does it to this day. But he did do it when I was growing up. And I remember he used to go and he'd go into a recording studio and he would just read a million lines over and over. And that's how they do it for like 5 hours straight. You're just reading every line. It's like, and touchdown on the right side, whatever the line is, right? They got all these generic lines and you're just going line through line through line. But he has no control over which line they use when. So at any given moment, the comment can come off a little sideways. You know what I mean? So every time it came off a little sideways, I made sure to record it and show it to him and let him know he had a bad comment on that play.
Mm-hmm. And now, obviously, what your dad does and, how successful he is on that end. Did you ever feel any pressure, on the football side of things? Because obviously your dad played for the Bengals and then your brother, went on and played at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And, obviously you had two, great players within the family, and then your career maybe got cut short. Did you ever feel any pressure like that you had to live up to anything in football wise?
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm looking back, it's like, I think the greatest thing, I was always somebody that, if this path was kind of slowing down or there was nothing I could do, I couldn't play. I'm like, okay, what's the next thing? You know what I mean? I was never like going to sit there and pout about it. It was, and as I look back, it was the greatest thing that could have happened to me was getting away from football, the playing side, and getting into learning this business. And if I had stayed healthy, it wouldn't have happened that fast for me. I wouldn't have been spending all my time editing videos and learning this business. And I wouldn't have probably have had that okay, what am I going to do with the next phase of my life thing happens so fast. I think for most people, it's like they're all in on trying to win a state championship and then get ready for the next season. Where I didn't have that luxury, and it's painful at the time when you're in high school and all you want to do is be out there with your teammates. And it's just more than anything the social aspect, right? Being able to hang out with everybody. Those are special moments, and so I had to sort of put that energy into that next passion, and luckily I was able to figure out what that was quickly, and sort of begin that next career, if you will.
That's a point that I definitely want to touch on because I would say that's something very similar to me, to where adversity, made me think about other paths. And so
Yeah.
as far as me, the injuries throughout my career, it was like, all right, I can't play football. Like, I'm at Notre Dame. Let me figure out something else that I want to do. I mean, there's so many opportunities, a great network. Let me figure out, what I can do outside of football. And so even then, I still didn't know what I wanted to do, but it was just, finally, after my, shot with the Raiders, it
Yep.
was like, all right, like I got some free time. I could travel and things like that. Let me, try to start this career. And if I didn't have those injuries, or if I was still playing and it was looking a little bit more promising, it's like, I feel like I wouldn't have made the transition, a lot faster. So I feel like that's definitely a key point to touch on,
Yeah.
using adversity to pivot and other opportunities and other career paths. So
Yeah.
kudos to you for that.
I think it's a great point, man. And pivot's one of my favorite words too, just because it's something that's just always going to happen in life, right? It's like you may have this vision of it's going to go exactly like this, and it's going to be this straight line to whatever your hopes and your dreams are, and it's always just going to be this, right? There's always going to be something you don't see, and how you react and respond to that is ultimately going to be what determines where you go in this world, and like I think about it, even with regard to Notre Dame's season this year, right? You're flashing me back a little bit to some of the stuff that Marcus Freeman would say when we would meet with them. Is he didn't picture going 0-3 for his first 3 games in Notre Dame, right? He takes over, the whole locker room runs in, everybody can't wait to have him as their new head coach. He wasn't planning on going 0-3. But watching the way that he stayed 1,000% true to how he believed a leader should be, right? And he's got his own unique style. There's no question he's got his own unique way about doing it. But he would always talk about, that line to success. It's not this straight line. As you go, it's like this, but you can't let those divots become cliffs. So you got to let those divots become something that's a springboard. Now you're right back where you want to go. And it's the way that I always view the world. He had a much better way of putting it than I did. And it was something that Coach Tressel, one of his mentors, sort of called him and explained to him as that season was beginning to go. The Marshall loss, now it's loud. We all know how Notre Dame gets. But it was really an important thing, I thought. And the way that he put it was cool. And it's always the way I've looked at it. I know it's the way you always looked at it, Sean, is okay, well, what's next? I don't care if it's good, bad, or indifferent. We're going to have to wake up tomorrow morning bright and early. We're going to have to go back to work. So let's not spend any time feeling bad for ourselves. We got a pretty great deal here. Let's go pursue what's next. And it's the way I've always tried to operate.
Now, you've talked about your perspective on getting into this space and into your field. But what about the outside noise? Because everyone's going to say, oh, Jac Collinsworth is only in this field because of who his dad is. And obviously we know how you feel about this. You work to get to where you are, put in the reps back in high school, right? But how often do you pay attention to some of that outside noise that, people, right, wrong, or indifferent, are going to have something to say?
Yeah, it's all part of it, man. It's all part of it. I feel like, if you're going to pursue something in this world, you're going to deal with it. Especially if you're going to pursue something in a similar field as your dad, it's going to come with it. And he's obviously reached the very top of this business. So if I got into this business and didn't think I was going to deal with some of it, then that's on me, right? But I always looked up to my dad. Anytime it's like, it's Cris Collinsworth's son, I'm proud of that. I'm damn proud of that. I know how he works. I know his path, his journey as a player, and then getting into broadcasting. And he's a wide receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals. It's not exactly a quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, right? It's not like he had this massive brand of football, and he just was a worker when it came to this business, right? And that was his trajectory. So I feel like I saw that path, and I wanted to pursue that path. It doesn't matter what people are talking about. what am I working like? What's my work ethic like? And those are the only things you can control. But if my dad was an accountant, I would have wanted to be an accountant. If he was a restaurateur, I would have probably been in the back washing dishes and couldn't wait to figure out a way to be a restaurateur. That was just the way that I looked at my dad. So to be able to work with him and cross paths with him, I ran into him on the field last night before the game as he's heading up to the booth and we're doing the pregame show. Like that little 20 seconds to me is something I'll remember forever. So I'm always super proud to be Cris Collinsworth's son.
Now, hold on. You talking about looking up to your dad. You guys are in the same field. I mean, you play by play. Your dad is color. Has it ever crossed your mind a little bit? Like, maybe link up for a game or something like that?
Well, you got this guy, Mike Tirico, who's one of the greatest in the history of the world. So I'm going to let my guy, Mike Tirico, go up there and call him. And I don't know. I'm sure, Sean, you got to spend some time around Mike and Carl. I'm not sure. Syracuse, you probably have crossed paths with him as well. But, man, that guy has taught me so many things about probably just being a leader within this business. And they're trying to help people and trying to understand that it's a big team effort, man. You got a lot of people who are putting shows on television. And almost every game this year, I would have a text from Tirico when I'd wake up, and it'd be something about, hey, it's windy up there in South Bend. Make sure you tape your notes inside that booth because once that wind gust hits, you're going to lose all your notes. You'd have some little tip inside that Notre Dame booth every week. So he's one of my best friends and biggest mentors in this business. So I'll let calling games be Mike Tirico's deal.
Mm-hmm. No, one funny thing I found out about Mike Tirico was obviously I always hear him on the TV, but that first time that I got to talk to him on like those Friday meetings and stuff, his voice is the same. Like I always thought similar, probably like Gus Johnson, like they have like just great TV voices. And when you talk to him in person, it's like I just expect like a normal, just like, hey, how's it going? But it's the same energy, it's the same voice, and that's always a good treat to be able to. And I didn't realize like how special it was to have, Mike calling games while we were playing at Notre Dame. And
definitely,
as you look at that and it's like, wow, like he's been everywhere, he's done everything, and it's like we get to have a conversation with him on Fridays, before the game, and he gets to comment on the way we're playing, and so it was definitely such an honor. But
it was, man.
to say that, and then also you take over in that role. What was that pressure like? Because obviously you talk about the Notre Dame fans and how tough they are. What was that pressure like?
Yeah, I guess I was the only one crazy enough to follow Tirico, man. I can remember thinking that at the very beginning of it. So I was at ESPN for a few years and then came back and did that pregame halftime role with Notre Dame football while he was still there. I'm so grateful for that opportunity because I thought it was like a chance to get a graduate degree in TV. It's like I'm here, I'm working hard, I'm doing my pregame show, I'm doing my halftime show, but I also got an opportunity to be in this room as Tirico's doing this job and watching the way he operates, watching the questions that he would ask you guys in those production meetings and watching the information that he cared about. It's like, okay, when you guys would say something, what is actually going to make the broadcast, and how is he going to turn that information around and present it to the audience? And so I was just sort of gathering data, gathering intel as to how he would operate for 2 years straight. And during that period, I had a lot of the same feelings as you, Sean. It's like, this is amazing that Mike Tirico is the voice of Monday Night Football. I can remember him calling NBA games forever when I was growing. He called every huge event, period. I mean, he's calling the Derby, he's hosting the Super Bowl. I mean, he's doing everything, and he's here at Notre Dame football, and he was so all into it. You know what I mean? That was the thing, is he was so into it. It's like the biggest event he had ever done was every Notre Dame football game because he had such a passion for college football. And you got the Syracuse flag right there behind you. It's like he has this love for college football. And to be able to meet with you guys, he looked so forward to it and thinking about what he wanted to talk to you guys about. It was such a passion deal for him. And so I wanted to take that and go, I feel the same way about it. So how do you keep this a passion? It's not a job, right? It's not something that you have to go do. You get to go do those things. And so as I watched Tirico, I just wanted to learn from him, and I did. And more than anything, I wanted to build a relationship so that if I could call him or text him at this point, I can continue to get that information from him, because you can only get those type of notes from somebody who's lived it And the fact that he's willing to share that information to me is invaluable stuff.
Now, is it pretty similar to and Carl, you could probably answer this one as well, but is it pretty similar to when you're playing in a game and obviously you go back after the game and review the film on, how well you play, your technique, things like that? Is that similar in the broadcasting space? Do you go back and because sometimes I'll even go on Twitter, check, search my name. It could be good or it could be bad, depending on the game. But does that happen at all to you guys in broadcasting?
You definitely, I think if you're not going back and watching shows, you're making a mistake. People have different philosophies on that. I've heard some people that say, once I finish a show, I'm on to the next one and I'm turning around and doing it. And maybe if you've done it for 20 years, that's a better approach. But for me, I study all of it. I just want to have a sense of, if they're running a viz, which a viz is like a moving graphic, right? For anybody who's not in the TV world, it's a moving animated graphic. Am I on time with that, right? Am I giving information that's not on the screen? There's a lot of moving parts within a broadcast, like the opening on camera. When the Notre Dame team runs out, the Here Come the Irish, are you getting out of the way of certain moments? Are you not talking when it's advantageous to just listen, to just let it breathe a little bit and let people feel what it's like to be at the stadium and hear the crowd, hear a third down, and are you telling the right stories? You know what I mean? It's like, I think that's a big part of the job is it's my job, is to decide what's the most important thing here. Like, what's the coolest story I can tell you? Only guys took for so much time, man. We got all this information in front of us, but what's the thing that if I had to tell you one bit before you left this restaurant, before you left this couch, if I had to tell you one story, what's that one I want you to know? And so I always try to focus on that. But man, to your question, I listen to every show back. More than once, typically. I take notes on it. Then I'll get with my producer. We'll watch it back together, and we'll form notes together. And then typically we'll do the same thing with Jason and make sure that everybody's on the same page with that. And then you try to go let those notes play out live and in real time the next week. But it's not like you're remembering every single detail, right? At the end of the day, you got to go play. It's like football. You can't be out there thinking. You got to go play, but you got to always study so that you know what you're trying to accomplish.
Same thing. I watch all my shows back. It's different, though. I would love to search my name, but I'm local right now. I'm not national like Jack is. I'm sure Jack can search his name every 5 seconds.
Hey, enjoy that while you got it. Enjoy that while you got
it. Yeah, but I definitely watch it back. And it's funny because when I was playing, you would like watch your stuff a lot, watch your teammates' stuff a lot. But and the point that I'm at right now, I'm only on TV for about 3 minutes at a time. So I'm spending a lot of time watching other people just because I'm so young. I'm still trying to find my voice, trying to find like where my talent is yet in this space. So it's kind of cool seeing, people who are 30, 40 years, my senior, figuring out how they maneuver stuff. But then also realizing, like, I'm 25. I also know what I would like to hear, Yep. And I think that's the kind of the balance that I'm wearing right now. But it's definitely it definitely translates for sure. Like, just because you on TV and you're like, oh, okay, I'm cool, whatever. Like, no, I want to get back and be better the next time. So I've definitely done that for sure. But I do want to ask, though, and I've asked Golic the same question. And I went to Newhouse, obviously, for 1 year. Shout out to the greatest communication school in the country. Sorry about you two ND folks. But anyways, I went to Newhouse, and I called one mock game. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I thought that calling a game would be easy peasy. I mean, we're just talking ball, right? Like, what's so hard? I mean, I played on a team with you guys. It can't be that hard, right? Wrong. It was impossible. Having said that, what is something like about that job? Is it like the adrenaline that you feel? Is it a rush? Because for the people at home, calling a game is so dang hard. Like, it's so darn hard.
Yeah, it's a very different deal, right? It's like if you're interviewing somebody, it's a very different skill set from if you're hosting a show, and that's a very different skill set from if you're calling a game. I think you made that point. It's a conversation, but more than anything, you want to be on top of all those moments. You know what I mean? And so it's a constant balance of telling a fun story or giving a little bit of information about this player or who he is or where he's from or how he got on the field, or, maybe he's been around forever. Maybe he's Sean Crawford and he's already got all these amazing accomplishments. And you got to tell somebody who's watching for the first time about him as a player, right? And you also got to balance that with somebody who's watched every game of Notre Dame football. So you want to be able to balance the two. But what I like about calling games is that there is how the heck could you script anything? You know what I mean? How could you script it? There is no script, right? It's all unfolding. You can study all week long. You can spend 7 days straight getting every piece of information, but it's going to happen live. And you don't know who the best player is going to be. You don't know who's going to catch the touchdown, who's going to run the touchdown or make the big tackle or have that big moment. So you got to know it about everybody. You got to have that information off the top of your head or on the top of your notes about everybody. But you have to live inside that moment. And for me, living on top of those moments and just waiting on that big play to celebrate it is the most fun part about calling games.
Mm-hmm. You kind of talk about just like letting the play breathe and, letting the audience hear things. What's your take on my take on Romo or Tony Romo is he may talk a little bit, but, obviously I'm not in the space and that's just me from a viewer. But what would be your take on Tony Romo?
So I really like Tony Romo. When I was coming out of college, Deshaun Kaiser, I was right around the same time as Deshaun, and we were down. I think it was like a Super Bowl weekend or something. I'm trying to think what we were doing. Deshaun was probably right before the draft, and he had invited Deshaun to go to dinner, and we were together. And so he's like, okay, my brother was there too, and so we all ended up going to dinner. And man, Tony treated us like family. So we're all sitting there at the table, and not only giving Deshaun advice, but giving us advice. And this was right around the time his career was winding down. But man, I'll never forget, Witten was there, Jason Witten. I'll never forget how those guys treated us. So I sort of became a fan immediately. And then at the end of the dinner, of course, there's probably 20 people or so at the table, and the entire restaurant. We were in Texas, so the whole restaurant might as well have been like a play. It might as well have been a stage because everybody's just looking at this table for the entirety of the dinner. And so Tony decides, we'll play a little credit card roulette, right? If your credit card gets your last one in there, you got a situation of, a lot of G's. It's going to be a big bill. And so he pulls one after another. He's passing everybody. DeMarco Murray was there. It's like everybody that could afford the dinner. He's like passing the credit card back. And of course, I'm the last one, right? And I didn't realize at the time that, I was trying to figure out if I could sell my car, what I needed to do to make sure I could pay for this dinner. But I didn't realize at the time it's like a lifelong trick of Romo that he just slips that whoever he wants to pay, he slides it right underneath, the lid of the hat, and then everybody else is in there. So the whole thing was a setup from the very beginning. But I feel like from that moment on, we kind of became friends, all of us. So I'm a big Romo fan. So he can do no wrong in my eyes. And I like the way he calls games, I mean, he's predicting things and he's doing certain things that others don't, but I don't think it has to be identical across the board. I think you can have your own style with this thing. I think it's important to be authentic to your style and not try to be somebody else. Like those are the people that I don't think hang out long. Is like, you got to do it your way. You got to do it the way you see it. You got to do it in your voice. And he certainly has done that.
Now, being able to be in rooms with, talk about guys like Tony Romo, Jason Witten, DeMarco Murray, but, also I saw you had Snoop Dogg, previously on a segment.
Yeah.
Talk about, interactions with him, and you mentioned, just a quick question and get out of the way and let them do their thing. I feel like that's a person you intro and then you just get out of the way and, hopefully he says something that's, that can be aired, but kind of just talk about, those interactions and just, maybe some other people that you've had, an opportunity to interview or, associate with on the camera.
He's one of my favorites, man. He's just one of my favorites. Snoop has got a lot of wisdom. He's got a lot of wisdom. And, we had Rodney came over to the house last night. We were just hanging out after the show. Rodney Harrison, because we did the game right down at Englewood and then came back just to hang out. And we were just talking about this. So it's funny that you bring it up. And he was just awesome. I mean, the way that the players would react and respond to being able to meet him and just like to spend that 5 minutes with him. It's like, forget about the question. You just have to let that moment take place for a second and then watch that interaction. And it was always so real and cool. But he also is a football coach. I mean, he's done some remarkable things. If you look at the youth football in California and all the leagues and players and guys that he's coached, and now they're going on and having NFL careers, and he's working on the next generation and bringing them up. So, and his work in the world of football and his knowledge of football, and he understands play calls, right? He's got NFL friends. And so he's asking a lot of these questions, but he was one of our favorites. And probably the coolest thing about him was that he was very humble. You never felt like you were talking to Snoop Dogg. He wanted to be a part of the team, and he wanted to ask Rodney questions, and he wanted to, be a part of that unit. It wasn't like, hey, this is all about Snoop. Now, granted, it was all about Snoop. Make no mistake. Like when Snoop's standing there, it's all about Snoop. But he never made it feel that way. And so we all three ended up becoming friends and probably did, 5 or something shows together, which was really cool memories.
Speaking of humble, I got to give you your flowers a little bit. You, on the broadcast of the Super Bowl this past winter, so it was your first ever Super Bowl. Congratulations on that.
Thanks, man.
The immense pressure of the Super Bowl. I mean, you got to think about it. I mean, obviously you know this, but it's the one game out of the year where it doesn't matter if you're a fan of the game. It doesn't matter. Everybody, my mom's watching, grandma's going to find a way to watch. They don't know what's going on. They just see a team in black and a team in blue colliding, hitting heads, and you're in the middle of it. Just talk about that experience and being able to knock that off the bucket list.
Yeah, so it was a week. It was out here in LA, which was great because I like being out here. I like SoFi Stadium, but it's not totally dissimilar for the broadcast as it is for the teams, in that it's a long week leading up to it, right? You got a lot of rehearsals, and you got a lot of it's a lot leading up to it, and then you wake up on the game. And we woke up at probably like 4:30 in the morning because the show would be on. It starts very early East Coast. I guess it was a 6-hour pregame show. So it's just that in and of itself. Typically Football Night in America is a 1-hour show, to give you a little perspective. So this is 6 times that. And so yeah, it was surreal, man. I had the feeling going over to the stadium. I had the thought that a lot of people talk about this day is our Super Bowl, right? Like whether it's in business or whether it's in school or whatever, it'd be like this day is our Super Bowl. It was an expression people used my whole life, and I was thinking, this is the Super Bowl. Like today, this is the Super Bowl, and so like to your point, you're going to have 100+ million people watching this event, and how do you tell them the right story? And I think the biggest thing with that game, and really with Sunday Night Football in general, is it's a broad audience, right? I mean, you got a lot of people that are watching that. And so you don't want to get too inside whether it's like the left guard and the technique or something. You want to talk to a lot of people and give stories that are going to connect with a broad audience. But it was the Cincinnati Bengals, the team I grew up rooting for my whole life. I grew up right there. LA, a place where my brothers lived. So it was this weird thing where you had the two teams that I'm around a ton that were playing against each other, and it kind of happened in that way. And of course, Dad was calling the game where he played with the Bengals. He played in 2 Super Bowls, and now he's up there in the booth for this. So it was just a lot of weird circumstances that sort of fell into that. But that was a day I'll never forget. I mean, Jay-Z's walking past you as you're getting ready to give a hit on the field. Jay-Z's walking by and he's saying what's up to Rodney, and I look down and it's Blue Ivy. Jay-Z's, I'm kind of hanging out with her and saying what's up. And so it was one of those days where nothing about it felt real, right? I mean, everything's like, you got Snoop Dogg playing the halftime show. So from start to finish, it was just one of those days. You felt like you were dreaming, but you had a job to do too. And so you're staying within your focus. Just a really rare day.
What was your take on this year's halftime performance? There were a lot of people who weren't, excited about the set list, but I thought it turned out to be great. But then also, what do you think about this year's, halftime performance with Rihanna? I think it's going to be very, very special.
It is going to be. It is going to be. And that's one of my favorite places to have a Super Bowl too. Down there in Arizona, I just think it's a great spot for that time of the year. There's a lot of events and stuff that goes on around the Super Bowl, and to be there in Arizona is a great spot for it. But the best Super Bowl halftime performance that I've seen was the one in LA. I mean, that was like, it's rare when just it feels like time stops for a second, and you're just living inside of a moment. You know what I mean? I think we all know when it's just a moment, And when Snoop was up there, dancing on the stage, and Dre was rapping, and then Eminem came out, you had 50 Cent hanging upside down. I mean, and it's in California, it's in Southern California. The crowd was so into it. Sometimes I think they turn the volume down at the stadium of the Super Bowl halftime show so that it will sound better on TV, which is really the goal, like making sure the audio is right, it's not echoey or whatever. This one wasn't like that. It was like they were putting on a concert for the stadium, and there wasn't one person that was there that wasn't on their feet singing every word to those lyrics. And so for me, that's the best one, and Rihanna's going to have to go top that.
And it's perfect. You obviously mentioned Cincinnati, and you grew up obviously in that area. I got to get your take on the Skyline chili. I hear a lot of things from people from Cincinnati, the little Kentucky area, but I've actually never had one myself. But you got to give me your take on it.
We'll get you down there. I can get you hooked up with some Skyline chili. So there's a few different of them, right? So Skyline's one of them. Dixie chili is another one. Gold Star chili is another. So there's a few different. They all basically serve the same style chili. To me, it's what chili's always been. Like some people that are from Texas or whatever will be like, "That's not chili," that's disgusting, and you're out of your mind. But when you grow up on it, it's like for me, it's like I grew up eating oatmeal every morning for breakfast. I grew up eating Skyline chili when we get done with a concert or whatever. It was just like a part of life. Every Friday night after a football game, we go straight to Skyline chili, or we go straight to Dixie chili, and the whole football team and all of our classmates would come, and it was the place where everybody would break down the week and break down the game, and it was like the meeting point for me growing up. And so it's a way of life. If I go home, the first thing I do, I'll get myself some Skyline chili, and then boom, I'm back home again, man. It's one of those things. It's just one of those things that if you're not from there, it's probably harder to understand than if you are from there.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to understand. Obviously, born and raised in Cleveland, and obviously the interstate rivalry between Cleveland and Cincinnati, you always, hating on one another. But the chili thing, I never quite understood. But I'm not going to knock it till I try it, because that's definitely. That. But I will ask this question, though. So you've been across the country, obviously, and you were recently in Buffalo a couple weekends ago I forget who the Bills played on Sunday Night Football.
Green Bay.
Exactly, and you got to experience Bills Mafia. Now, I've been up here for the past 2 years, and Bills Mafia, I thought the Browns were insane. As a Browns fan, Bills Mafia is like a whole different level. What was that 24 hours like in Orchard Park?
That place, man, if you've never been to a Bills game, obviously you have, but you got to do it. Like the NFL, there's 32 cities, and there is nowhere like Buffalo. I mean, there is just nowhere like Buffalo. There's no fan base like it. It reminds me a lot of a college fan base. It's what they have. You could go up there in the middle of the summer, and they're thinking about Bills football. You go up there on a Sunday night weekend, they've been looking forward to that night for 365 days. I mean, that's how Buffalo is. And so the parking lot, and it's always freezing cold, but everybody up there, they don't even feel it, right? It's not, so you can't act cold. The last thing you can do is act cold. So you got to be looking tough no matter how you're feeling. But the way that wind blows there, but I also like the stadium because the fans are right on top of it when you're on the field. So when you take that walk and you get in there, the fans are super close to the sideline. At some stadiums, you kind of have that 10-foot wall or what have you, where they feel separate. They're right on top of you there. So you can go say what's up to them, and you can get a chance to hang out with them. But it's similar to Green Bay to me, where they live for football. They love football. They're always positive. They're always upbeat about it, and they're welcoming because they've been waiting for a long time for you to be there. So they want you to experience the best of Bills football or Packers football. But that's one of those places. If we ever have a Bills game, we can't wait to get up there, man. It's a very different type of experience, and it's loud as heck. I mean, it is loud up there, similar to big-time college football, which is why I compare the two.
Mm-hmm. You talk about the Bills, Bills Mafia. Touch on a Notre Dame game this year where it was rocking. It was, obviously you've been to many. You saw, many big games during your time there. You saw your brother play in some big games as well. But first time doing the play-by-play, talk about one moment in the booth where it's just like you might have just like lost your mind over a cool play, an exciting play, or an explosive play.
Yeah, well, probably the Clemson game was one of the loudest that I can remember up there because it was from early on. And I think Notre Dame fans are probably curious about how they would hang in, just because they had had a few hiccups throughout the course of the year. I mean, people remember the Stanford game and the Marshall game, and you didn't know what to expect of them at home. They had played some of their best games on the road, which is kind of it's a random thing, right? It's like, man, you're trying to explain it, and even talking to Freeman, you try to explain it, but it didn't really make sense to anybody. So then for them to finally put it together and look their best at home, it was loud from the start to the finish of that game. It was just every big play would be even more rocking. But also that snow game, the last game of the year when the snow started coming in and it's coming in and it starts sticking to the field. And I mean, you're up in the booth and you really could not see the field. I mean, I was calling it off the monitor, and even on the monitor, it just looked like a straight up fog. It's like it runs off the right, and I'm pretty sure that it was Chris Tyree. I have no clue, to be honest. But the way that the fans stayed and then started just having a party in the snow, and the players were having the same party in the snow. I've looked forward to a snow game inside Notre Dame Stadium for a long time, and that'll be a memory I won't forget.
It hurt, honestly, when you said halfway through, you said something about playing on the road, and y'all kind of turned things around, taking on my guys, and it got kind of ugly up there.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that hurt. That hurt to hear. I have also seen that you're decorating the number of sports you've called. I mean, the Derby to the Olympics to NASCAR, like. He's Cris Collinsworth's son. He's like football through and through. What was the Derby and like NASCAR? Like, how was that atmosphere?
Wild. The Derby's like 90 minutes from where I grew up, so I've been to a lot of those. But more than anything, just hanging out in the infield and enjoying the races and doing it that way. But when you're doing it on TV, that's another one where it's a lot of buildup. It's a long pregame show that goes into it. And the Derby's, it's a party and it's an event. And there's celebrities and big names and a lot of people watching for reasons other than horse racing. And then all of a sudden, the biggest horse race of the year breaks out. So you're kind of trying to celebrate the party and bring people to the party for those hours. And then, boom, there's the excitement of the horse race. But the horse race is short, right? I mean, what is it, like 2 minutes or something like that? So it's really more about the celebration of all that. And I don't know if you guys have ever been to a NASCAR race. Like I didn't grow up. Yeah, it was like, So when I went down there, and really when I got to know those guys, and it was Dale Earnhardt Jr., who works for NBC and is big voice in the booth, and Steve Letarte, who was his crew chief, and Rick Allen, who calls the play-by-play, Jeff Burton, who is another guy that works there and does them, and so all those guys and the way that they sort of took me in and just let me be a part of the crew. They didn't have to. They could have been like, you're a reporter and you're out there in the infield looking for a story. You go do that and go do your thing, right? We'll take care of the real stuff. But I mean, man, they would invite me to dinners and invite me to hang out in the trailer and invite me to get to know the drivers a little bit. And we'd get on that iRacing rig and we would play the video game. Like that's a big thing within that world. It's a good way to learn about the sport and how it actually works. It was cool. Like I think that it's a sport where they want you to be a part of it. They want more fans. They want football fans to come experience it and then go back and tell the story about what it was like. So I've definitely tried to do that, but they'll still come out and hang out with us at a football game. So that friendship from the summer or two of doing that has carried on, which is a cool deal.
Yeah, that's definitely one special thing about NBC is I see we mentioned earlier off camera, Catherine. I see her everywhere, covering a bunch of sports, and so I definitely got to get in on the NBC. Got to give me an NBC contract someday soon.
Amen.
But, before we get off, I do want to talk about just the TV deal, the TV rights with college football, and so obviously that's a huge thing. And obviously NBC that, they have a piece in that. So kind of just, touch on that a little bit, what you can, I guess, touch on, but just want to hear your thoughts on that as well, as conferences start to switch up TV rights and things like that.
Yeah, I think, college football it's bigger than ever right now. I mean, if you just look at the numbers of all these deals, it's bigger than ever. And, everybody has their own opinion on on what it is, right? On the transfer portal, and everybody has passionate feelings about this or about that, and NIL, people have passionate feelings about that. Like, it's different. Is it what college football used to be? No, but is it? I still enjoy it. I mean, I'll tell you this: Saturday, I'm either working a college game, happy as heck to be there, or I'm watching a college game. I don't know about you guys. And the one thing about the transfer portal that would probably make me a little bit nervous is when you're 18 or you're 19, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this too, Sean, is like sometimes you could be emotional at that age. And, like I can think back to, if you had a bad day or maybe you had a bad week or a bad month, would that be enough at that age to go, hey, I want to scrap this and go figure out if I can play at another school? And if you had that opportunity and it's as easy as it is, it would be enticing. You would think about it. You know what I mean? And so there's probably was some benefit to the way that it was that, you had to tough it out. You had to go through those bad weeks, and you had to, back to that adversity point, you had to learn at 18 years old that it ain't always going to be easy. It ain't always going to be your show. You're not going to be the star. You're the star in high school. You're not the star here. Michael Mayer's the star here. Get in line, And so it's like Isaiah Foskey, he's the pass rusher. He's the guy. And so you have to learn and be able to support those guys and not go and try to pursue the spotlight on your own. So I think that there was value in what that was. To me, the NIL I have no issue whatsoever with that. Like, I think it's awesome to watch players be able to get what they're due. And so I think it'll continue to grow, and I think it'll continue to be more money in that. And I think podcasts. I think you'll have shows that'll keep going. Like, think back to Kyle Hamilton and the show that those guys had, and I thought that was amazing. And being able to hear their voices and how they actually felt hanging out in their garage with them. So I think all that stuff's great. People being able to get what they're worth is awesome. But my only thing with the transfer portal is I hope people can still learn how to go through some of those tough times, because it's going to happen to them later in life, so it'd be good to learn it when you're young.
Mm-hmm. Now, in growing up, I don't know how Kentucky is for you. So like, we're kind of like college football states. I mean, obviously you got our pro teams as well, but like we, grew up in the college athletic atmosphere a little bit. But it is kind of weird to see the two LA schools come to Big Ten country in a few years. And it is kind of weird to see UT and Oklahoma. Apparently today they're trying to move as soon as next year. But you're at a school, and me and Sean always talk about this. You're in a school that's like kind of separated from everywhere. Like, Notre Dame is the one school that isn't in a conference, their own TV deal. Seeing everyone move around and all these moving parts, but at a school like Notre Dame, it's kind of like a tradition that, no, we're Notre Dame. We have a prestige to us. And obviously, you're not an alum, but you call their play-by-play games. Is it awkward at all, like looking at all these moving parts and knowing that you're Notre Dame? Or are you looking to the future, like, where things going to change or not? Because from someone like myself, I'm looking at Syracuse. I'm like, man, we haven't been at our peak since we've been in the ACC, but there's no going back to no Big East. It doesn't exist anymore. Just speak on it from your perspective in the Notre Dame realm.
Yeah, I think if you're Notre Dame, it's no different than what it's been, right? There's a lot of movement and there's a lot of conversations, but everybody seems to keep talking about Notre Dame. You know what I mean? And that's typically good for Notre Dame. So you can remain independent, and you could probably do a TV deal that way. If they want to join a conference, they could probably get some big number that direction too. So I think that they're still a very unique property. I think that if you project the future of the program right now, they're going to be darn good over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Marcus Freeman's a young guy. He may be there for a long, long time. And you start looking at these recruiting classes he's bringing in. If you just spend 5 minutes with him, you understand that the trajectory is right. You understand that they got their guy. And they're very lucky that he came in as the defensive coordinator, especially given the timing. Nobody thought Brian Kelly was about to leave. And so it gave him a chance to get Freeman in there, learn and understand Notre Dame football without the weight of the world on his shoulders for a year, and then elevate, become the guy. And he got to go through a lot of things last year. I mean, I thought he got some really good growing experiences last year. And I think that the value of that brand has never been stronger.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely excited to see the guys get rolling. And also, I think the 12-team playoff is going to be huge. I I would have loved it this year. Even last year, we would have got in. So definitely think it'll be very exciting. College football will be fun. You'll be calling a lot of top 5, top 10 matchups in the coming years. But before we get off, I want to ask you one more question. Coming from a sports family, what was your favorite sports movie growing up?
Ooh, man. Favorite sports movie growing up? I got a lot of them. Oh,
You could go top 3.
yeah. Yeah. No, I'm trying to give you a good one. I mean, I can remember watching Rudy for the first time when I got my wisdom teeth taken out. And that was a super vivid memory. My mom went and bought it. That's probably back in the days where you like go buy the DVD or whatever and you put it in.
VHS.
Yeah, so I can remember that super vividly. I mean, I probably watched Happy Gilmore like 7,000 times, something like that. So it was always about laughing and enjoying those sports movies. But man, I'm trying to think of my favorite one all time. It probably would have to be some football movie. Remember the Titans. It very well may be that one. It very well may be that one, man. So, and I'm a huge movie guy. I feel like I probably watch multiple movies every week because it's just something you can sit down with people you're close to and chill. And I'm all about kind of hitting the couch and watching those type of movies.
Got you. I was just watching Coach Carter today, so I figured I'd ask that question.
That's a good one too.
I was watching it with Julian Aquara, and we were just watching it. It was just like every time someone did something, it was like you got 1,000 push-ups, 500 suicides,
Yeah.
and I was like, I don't know if I would like. I could go through some tough things, like obviously Bayless, and the stories you hear about him, but I don't know if I could have did, what Cruz had to do to get back on the team. Like I might have just talk about the portal. At that point, I would have used the portal.
Hey, I want to ask you about Bayless because people that I talk to, players I talk to, it feels like there was something when he came in there where Notre Dame football was going changed, and he was somebody that stayed when Coach Freeman left and made a point about staying. What has he brought to Notre Dame football? What is it because that's the part of the year where fans don't get to see it. They just get to hear the story of, hey, you got a good strength coach. But he spends a ton of time with you guys. So what do you think when he got there shifted about that offseason world and who the team was when they showed up in August?
Well, it was perfect timing for him when he joined the team. We just went 4-8, so
Right.
guys had a lot of time to recover and to reflect on the season, and just the addition to him, it created an identity, it created a foundation to where whether anytime we experienced any adversity or things weren't going our way, whether it be in class, off campus, on campus, on the field, anything like that, we always got to think back to our foundation. And that's kind of what he instilled is we're not on time unless we're 10 minutes early. We're not, you're not giving all you got, until, you bring your brother across the line, just things like that, being accountable and just relying on each other. And if you see someone doing wrong to figure out a way to communicate. Everyone, you got to communicate different with different players. And I think Coach Bayless understood that. And so his first year, he pushed us. It was challenging. The portal, I'm sure, would have been used for some players for sure. But it was just, he really created a foundation, and it's still something that we can still build off of and think back to and go back to as well.
Yeah, and then the 10 win seasons just took off from there. It's just
exactly.
Can't argue with that.
Right, awesome. And so, Jac, we appreciate your time. Obviously it's hard to get you away from what you do. You do a lot of things. You do a lot of things well. And so very excited to, have you come on and, spend a couple, almost an hour with us. So thank you.
Hey, really appreciate you guys having me. It's awesome hanging with you. And Sean, I remember your career at Notre Dame, man. You were one hell of a football player. And so now to watch you transition into this is awesome. And you're getting some huge guests and you know exactly what you're doing. And Carl, I'm going to be following your career now too. So I look forward to seeing you guys and on TV, on podcasts, on all this stuff as we go. So let me know how I can help as you guys go along.